Today I'm going to talk about the 10 things to master in Google Tag Manager to become a real Google Tag Manager expert. And let me just go over to my little screen here. And let's get started. First of all, about MeasureSchool, we are a YouTube channel. We also have our premium membership called Measure Masters. And we actually also provide implementation services for clients if businesses want to have the stuff that we teach implemented. So we have been doing this now for over 8 years. It has been a long time. Thank you so much for the people who are here already supporting, seeing a lot of familiar names. We have been able to teach a lot of people, and teaching is what we really strive in and like to do. But at the same time, we also doers, and we have worked in Google Tag Manager a lot over the years, and I have learned. I'm just standing on people's shoulders. So there are great people out there in the community. Phil is one of them. I've been following Phil for a long time as well. So it's always great to be part of such an event. Quickly about myself, my name is Julian. I have a lot of funny pictures of myself as I do these YouTube things, and then we always need these pictures for thumbnails. So check out the thumbnails on the YouTube channel. They are getting better just because now there's AI, and we can put put hats on myself and so on. So they're getting funnier by the day. I currently live in Vietnam. So one fact about me, Vietnam is it's the country of motorbikes. If you think of rice fields, well, think again. If you go to the bigger cities, everybody rides a motorbike, and just Google for a motorbike Vietnam, you will see some really funny pictures because they are able to put stuff on their motorbike that you wouldn't be putting on a Cybertruck. Let's put it this way. And fun fact about me, I'm an avid meditator. I meditate about 1.5 hours a day. And that gives me my calm in the exciting data world that we live in today. So today we want to talk about going from noob to ninja. Obviously, there are levels to the game of going from a beginner to expert. And I really want to talk about the expert stuff today because quick backstory, I've been playing the guitar since I was small, I don't know, 5 or 6, something like that. And yeah, I had to learn the classical guitar, perform at various Christmas events and so on. And didn't really like it until I turned a teenager. And yeah, that's exactly how guitars work. I found a skill to impress the girls with my guitar skills. And so obviously I joined the band and tried to hit it big. Did this for a few years, and voila, I was on stage as a famous rock star. Unfortunately, that was not the case. At some point, I stopped playing the guitar, went to university and so on. Instead, I became a YouTuber, I guess. Nowadays, I only play the guitar at Christmas events again. Sometimes for the daughter, I play the ukulele, or having the guitar actually in the background of my YouTube videos as props. So yeah, the question is like, why didn't I become a rock star? I guess at some point something went wrong. But it was easy actually going from, if you think about it, going from beginner to an advanced level. That is definitely possible. There are lots of learning resources out there. But going to become an expert, to becoming a ninja, that is much, much harder. Just because maybe there are not that many experts out there. Maybe they don't share their tricks and tips on how to actually do this. And there are no step-by-step instructions on how to become a GTM expert. So if you want to become a GTM expert, then this talk is for you. It might not be for everybody because obviously some people say, okay, I learned enough about the tool. I don't really need to go more in depth with it. But I wanted to paint a path, at least from my experience, of the 10 things to master in Google Tag Manager to become and call yourself a real expert. And as an expert status, you would be able to create your own agency or be a freelancer, talk on authority on the tool, as well as being able to just make really great tracking deployments work. And that's what I think everybody strives here for. All right, so without further ado, let's go through the list. First of all, you need to know your components. Yes, there are tags, triggers, and variables. Everybody knows about them, but you really need to understand them. And that is the basics of Google Tag Manager. And I think oftentimes people just know about, oh, I need to deploy this tag and then my tracking will be deployed, but it will not tell you if you really understand the tool in depth, because tags, triggers, and variables are connected, and there might be also folders and templates, as you might know, but you can really intersect these different components with each other. Variables are obviously part of the filters inside of a trigger. Tags can be powered by variables. You can put data into tags via variables. You can even build triggers based off things that are part of tags, also called listeners, where you could create your own listener that feeds back into a tag, and then you can into a trigger, and then can create your own triggers. So understanding the dynamic between the components is vital part of being a Google Tag Manager expert, and that also gives you the ability to play the whole piano, the whole way of doing things, not only the individual nodes, because you are then able to take a tracking case that you want to deploy or find a solution for, and you can think of all of the different variables that go into such a tracking deployment. You can make it up in your head, and then you will be able to come up with solutions that not everybody has heard of yet. I mean, just look at Phil's presentation. There are some cases in there that I haven't heard of yet. And there are definitely, from his experience, a lot of things that you only come up with once you really understand the tool. So that's point number one. Connecting to that, obviously, the data layer. Now, the data layer is maybe something that you shy away from because it is kind of code in the end. But if you want to call yourself a true master in it, you need to be not only able to utilize the data layer, obviously data layer variables and so on, but also define a data layer, build them up from scratch, and design them so they're useful for the business. And that's all about customization. So just an example here, we come up with these documents for our clients where we actually take, for example, the Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics 4 data layer, and redesign them for them. Actually, that's an old one from UA. And then if they need custom dimensions in there or custom data points, we would put them in there and explain it to the client as well, because somebody needs to put this in place, and that's the developer in the end. So being able to actually utilize and know how this data layer is put together, I actually built a little tool around this where we are able to build a data layer from scratch and translate it into the code itself. That is vital to understanding and knowing how you would be able to utilize the data layer later on. And that is just something, yeah, I cannot stress enough. That's something you need to be able to do. Not only writing a data layer, transforming the data layer inside of Google Tag Manager is huge. So taking an existing data layer and extracting the data out of it and making it into the format that you want it to be, that is something that I think is a reserved skill for some more advanced users there. You need to know the difference between the data layer and the internal data model of Google Tag Manager. And then really, in the end, you become a proponent of the data layer. You become a defender of the data layer, because there are a lot of bad advice out there on just using scraping. Oh, can we just take this part? And yeah, oftentimes the client asks for that because they have heard about something like that. But you should become the defender of the data layer and say, well, it's actually something that if we define it correctly and put it in place correctly, it will hold longer than just scraping. So get used to the data layer. Next part is obviously JavaScript. And we have seen a little bit of JavaScript in Phil's slide already. There is a case to be made for JavaScript. Google Tag Manager in the end is a JavaScript injector, right? It's based on JavaScript. You need to know how JavaScript actually works. Then you will be able to understand complex problems such as race conditions and so on. Learning then JavaScript and just starting the journey of learning JavaScript can be very rewarding, because you simply learn programming. You simply understand the processes much better internally from Google Tag Manager. When I learned more about Google Tag Manager and learned more about programming and JavaScript, this really opened up a whole new world for me. I was able to learn about CSS selectors, which you use in listeners, for example, quite extensively. You will learn about regular expressions, which you can in turn use in different other modes of Google Tag Manager as well, like a trigger, for example. You can then build your own listeners. You can understand the templates and the codes that you see online. And then when it comes to customization, you can take a code and actually customize it to your use case. And that's, I think, not the copy paste that you are always able to do. Go into Google and find a script, copy paste it in, but actually customizing the code is something that you really need to master in order to become to that expert level. And obviously, it's super useful then in the custom JavaScript variable and also debugging later on. So JavaScript is really, an all-around tool. How good are people at JavaScript if they are a true expert? All right, next skill is planning. And I would say if you don't prioritize planning over implementation, then you're doing something wrong, because planning has, or the experts know that planning has a lot of advantages. So I always, when I talk, for example, to a new freelancer, might be in design, might be in programming or so, if we want to hire them, I kind of try to figure out like what kind of questions are they asking me in the first call, because that really gives you a good idea of how much they will put into the planning stage and what they can imagine from their skill set, what they can actually do. And also frankly tell you about maybe restrictions that are in mind. So you need to be able to do that in a consulting call or with the first client contact. You need to take up their requirements, but then also essentially start planning in your head to know what is possible, how to do it the best way, and then ensuring that you don't forget anything. You can put it actually on paper. So can be simple as a spreadsheet. So we come up oftentimes with like a spreadsheet where we just put in our tags and so on. And then we have all the configurations in there and just have something then that we can work off and know what our plan actually is. You can do a more extensive measurement plan, obviously, depending on your goals. And if you have more complex technologies that you're working with, not only Google Tag Manager, then that might be something that you also want to take a look at. But planning is so crucial. And that document, you can use it as something that you can get buy-in for. So you can go to clients and tell them, hey, I'm about to execute this. Is this okay? We have like a milestone in there. And the measurement plan is really something you can even sell as an individual product. It could be a deliverable and a milestone of your product itself. So take a look at planning if you haven't done so and get really good at it. That's my recommendation. All right, then it comes up to reps. So like in the gym, even if you take those steroids that everybody's talking about, the sets and reps still matter. You will not have any gains if you just take the steroids. So same in Google Tag Manager. Yes, you can read about it, you can learn from other people, and you can attend something like this. But unless you do it and do it a lot, you will not come across these really interesting edge cases that you haven't seen before. And so I don't try to shy away from any kind of implementation work. Even nowadays, if somebody pays me a lot and says, hey, can you set the GA4 tag up for me? I will do this any time of day, because it just forces me to go through the things again and again. And sometimes I find a better way. And that is obviously something I want to put in a video also. So you need to see a lot of implementations before you see them all. And at the beginning, if you're just starting out, I wouldn't turn down any projects just because it is like beneath you or so. So think about these sets and reps, how you can actually get them in. And even if it's just on a demo website that you have, having a little project that you deploy a cookie consent banner on and make that work with Google Tag Manager just to see the other side of things is just so crucial in order to become that expert that you might be out to be. All right, and then we come to translating and communicating. Now, if you think about it, Google Tag Manager is really just a communication tool, I think. It is, in essence, an abstraction of JavaScript and then like a no code nice interface on top of it, and it asks us a lot of questions, right? So first time you logged into Google Tag Manager, you were asked to deploy a tag, like what do you want to deploy today? When do you want to deploy it? What data should be sent over to your tool? And that are crucial questions that Google Tag Manager kind of led us through. Obviously, there's a lot of more skill that you would need in order to become very skilled at this tool and make tracking this deployment work seamlessly. But at the same time, you can extend that kind of skill set to take beyond it, because you need to communicate when you work with Google Tag Manager. It's a well-known myth that the Google Tag Manager is replacing the developer or is not there. Nobody will know about it because it's just happening in the background. No, it is a great tool to come in and be used by you as the implementer, but also by many other people, such as the marketers or the developers, to deploy marketing tracking. And that, though, needs to be communicated. So the flow of publishing, how things are set up, are there with a purpose. And you can now, and for many years now, leave notes on your implementations. You can write really nice release notes, so to say, or version notes, and can put something in to leave behind actually as a trace if you don't want to do a big documentation. Now, documentation has still its place, especially in big and large tracking deployments, but start with the notes if you don't have them yet. And I think Fred Pike will probably also talk about this later on. He has some great notes from what I've seen in his last presentation. So you can glean from that one. And it's really a skill to translate then also the business requirements to this tracking deployments. Do we need everything? What do we need? How can we actually make this work later on? And then once you start implementing, or during the sales process, or even afterwards, you need to communicate this to the teams out there, to the stakeholders, to the developers, of how this actually works, how they can make that work. So it's just crucial to communicate, and don't shy away from this. This is outside of Google Tag Manager, but that's definitely a skill that will bring you further in your work with GTM. Back to the technical stuff. You obviously need to also debug and test. Now, this is something we as implementers do all the time. You, first of all, need to know how to look under the hood, right? So just like a car, well, nowadays with a Tesla, maybe you will not find anything under the hood, or just the storage there. But you need to know how to look under the hood and maybe then dissect of what should be happening when I turn the key in the ignition. Why doesn't my car start, right? You need to become the expert, and there are tools out there that can help you out there. There are obviously Chrome extension, developer tools. You need to be really good at being able to go to your website and then say, okay, I have my website right here. The first contact point is my tag assistant. I have what information can I glean from this thing? What can I see in the developer tools? I think the network tab is something that is very underrated. You need to be knowing how you can pick up on requests. The JavaScript console is something to check certain things and see error messages, of course. Elements panel, and then also the application view is super important for cookies nowadays. So something that I would really get familiar with. And this is just a iceberg here of tools that you can look at. Unfortunately, it's obviously getting harder, right? Google Tag Manager, with the server-side tagging out there now, you might not be able to see all the requests go through the network tab, or you might not know what to look for in order to find the right request. And that's where you need to keep digging. You need to figure out maybe even other scenarios where you would be able to see the data. Obviously, there's also Chrome extensions out there. Long story short, you need to know how to look under the hood. Then you need to take the components that go into a tracking deployments, the variables, and you need to be able to sequence them. So what happens after what? And then the real skill is to devise a test. And a test means oftentimes just going through a test order, and that's what a lot of us do when we try to deploy tracking or try to dissect a tracking deployment and get closer to a error that we have. Yes, it's getting harder, but devising then the test and coming up with testing scenarios, maybe sending the data to another tool in order to see that data actually coming through, is vital to becoming really good at finding the error and fixing it then. Yeah, one thing I wanted to say about getting harder, it's also getting harder with all of these buggy tools out there. You might know what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to AI. It sucks your data in, and you don't know how it actually comes up with the result, which makes it even harder to look under the hood and know what's actually happening, which I kind of hate, but yeah, we'll get to AI in a second here. All right, then almost done. Don't keep secrets, contribute. So I'm a big proponent of going through the chain of obviously learning from different resources out there, but then also doing, so implementing that stuff, learning on real projects. But in the end, in order to elevate your skills even further, go and teach it to somebody, go out and contribute. So where can you contribute? Many places out there. Google Plus was the forum for Google Tag Manager for a long time at the beginning. That's where I first came across Phil Pierce and saw the stuff that he was sharing, because I was just interested and wanted to know what are other people using this tool for and what kind of weird tricks did they come across. And that was really, really helpful. And you help out a lot of people there. But at the same time, if you need to contribute and write something down in, for example, Medium or LinkedIn or MeasureSchool, then you need to think about what you are actually putting out there. And that oftentimes requires you to go back and maybe think about what you, how you dissect or made a tracking deployment work. And that will help you in turn to understand it just that much better next time around. Okay, I already talked about teaching a little bit. That is actually my 9th point. You might know the saying of those who can't do, they teach. It's kind of true for some areas. For Google Tag Manager in particular, at least from my experience, I can tell you that teaching has been the greatest thing that happened to me, because yeah, to become a real teacher, I think to become a real expert, you need to be teaching, and you're already teaching. You're probably teaching your clients this tool just so they understand what it actually is and why you're implementing it. You might have a following, or you might have something on LinkedIn where people actually know what you want to know what you're up to. So you're writing it there. You might have blog readers if you have any kind of outlet, or you just have interns or colleagues that you could teach this to and show them. Well, what teaching actually does, again, it helps you to go down back to the basics. And
Julian, a quick thing,
yes.
we're seeing the screen we're seeing is the demo shop. Is that
oh
correct?
Yeah, that's yeah, okay. So contribute, and then let's go to those who teach. Thanks for letting me know that. So teaching is a really good way of, again, dissecting and helping out to form your understanding of things. And I think that it really just gives me a new view on things. So for example, if you would need to describe your tracking deployment, even if it's just deploying Google Analytics 4, what are the steps that you need to go through? What are the important parts? Is this best practice, or is this something that you would need to customize next time around? So something that I think a lot of people can learn from is simply going through that process of teaching something to somebody else. And yeah, ask yourself, for example, how would you describe the data layer to somebody who doesn't know what the data layer is all about? Let me know in the chat. I would be interested in that one. All right. Number 10, obviously, it had to be AI. The AI is coming, and we should embrace it. Funny story is somebody wrote me on LinkedIn, asked me, hey, I found this video of yours, and I downloaded the code, I put it into my thing, and it doesn't work on my website, right? And there's a classic case where, and he said, can I book a consultation call just so you can help me to customize this? And I said, sure, we'll look at your website and then we'll try to figure it out on the call. And 2 days later, he said, oh yeah, I forgot. This was the HTML, so I put it into ChatGPT, and it actually gave me the code back that I needed to change around. So all is good. Thank you so much for your help. So that's me being replaced by AI, kind of. No, so AI, if you think about it right now, ChatGPT, large language models, yeah, it can give us instructions on maybe how we would deploy some tracking technique that is already out there. But being really novel in terms of like, I have this website case and what tracking is actually something that we should implement. It's not quite there yet, right? There are actually not so many use cases, I would say, for ChatGPT with Google Tag Manager. Obviously, there's a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of regex and so on. But on the data analysis side, on the data analysis and data visualization side, there's more and more coming up. And it's more suited for that. But in terms of like tracking deployments, implementations, technical stuff, yes, it can program now, but it's not quite there yet for our specific use case. That said, it doesn't mean that it will not be there in a year or two, because there are already autonomous agents out there that actually perform actions for you. And if you can train it on the use case of Google Tag Manager, then maybe at some point this will be possible, or I would predict that it would be possible. Just somebody has to really build it and put their time into it. Right now, we are seeing a lot of the general use case of AI, especially with ChatGPT. And then, to be honest, with the Gemini announcement yesterday, who doesn't say that Google will not do it, right? Maybe Google Tag Manager will get a chatbot and say, like, what do you want to deploy, this and this? Okay, I will build it for you, and then you can maybe control it and so on. So at that point, we might be not the ones who are implementing our own tracking anymore, but we will still be there in order to take the decision on clicking on publish, for example, right? So I think we should take that moment and say, okay, once it comes along, we will embrace it. And what can I do in order to still not be obsolete here? Well, we can take a look at the 10 things that we have talked about. I think they will just get so much more important to know what is actually happening. If something is going wrong, you still need to be able to debug. You still need to know the technical details. But then the soft skills of translating, communicating will be so much more important. All right, with this, these are the 10 things. I hope you learned something. Thank you so much for listening to me today. You can find me at MeasureSchool.com, YouTube channel, and also on LinkedIn. And with that, I'm happy to take any kind of questions, or if you have any thoughts, and let me know in the chat as well how you liked it. And yeah, always trying to get more data on presentations. So thank you so much for inviting me as well, and let's go into the questions.
Great, thanks for that, Julian. I'm also just going to post the speakers' questions to get a copy of your slides just in chat.
Oh, yeah.
There's 3 questions on here. I'll start with the first one. It's a bit of a long one. Using JavaScript in GTM via either custom JavaScript or custom HTML, where would you say these would be useful to take advantage of GTM versus putting requests to IT to add logic per event? So I think the question is, should you do listeners or should you add HTML5 attributes or IDs and like a generic HTML5 attributes? I'm struggling to work out where the line is between doing it hacky with JavaScript versus waiting to developers to implement, which obviously takes longer. Also considering page load speed, just wondering if you had any. I mean, page load speed is not really an issue on that one, but I think it's more of a. I would say it depends how big the site is. But what were your thoughts, Julian?
Yeah, really It really depends. Our famous sentence. I think depending on your skills, again, communication is key here. If you work well with the team together and they are able to execute very fast, then you might want to try to go the non-hacky way. Depending on your goals of the project as well, depending if you, for example, are the freelancer, you might have a different standing and you might not be able to get anything done without having the buy-in and going through very long chains. Communication should always be on the forefront of this, and going the more robust way, I would say, is something that I would strive for, always strive for. So obviously, if you build something in custom HTML and have it in there that maybe not be properly documented, then the next person that goes in, or the next redesign, might kill this whole tracking deployment. So it's maybe not as robust, as opposed to putting it into the queue, into the management queue of your developers to build in a special kind of listener. Maybe there it will be managed correctly. And you are then also putting it out of your hands in terms of the responsibility in the end, right? But really, it depends. Sometimes when we work with clients, we need to go the hacky way just because we need to get things done. But it's not my favorite way, and I would need to make them aware of these risks and communicate this to them, right? At the same time, if yeah, the ideal client would be very responsive, would be say, hey, you have one developer here, he will do everything for you and he will do it fast. That would be obviously great, but it's not the reality all the time. So you need to work it out with your client, or just take the risk of getting the project done in a more efficient way. There's also a hybrid approach. You could do the hacky way, and after they implemented the other thing, you could turn your tags off and use the data layer pushes that were put in place by the developers, for example.
I think the only thing to be careful of, I guess, would be if they're using like CSS listeners and the developers like change all the elements on the page, and it obviously stops the sort of hacky method working. Alina has asked, what are some resources you recommend to learn JavaScript?
So JavaScript, obviously there is a big JavaScript community, first of all, out there, and it's a big programming language because you can do a lot of things with it nowadays. So it's not just the web anymore, and it's not just the tracking use case itself. Nonetheless, if you get started as a beginner with JavaScript, there are a few resources. Free Code Camp is one of them. There's the MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, where you can read up on certain things. I oftentimes also use ChatGPT nowadays. It can explain code quite well. I wouldn't let it write all of the code, but it can explain code, which just makes things much easier, especially if you forgot a comma somewhere. But then get into writing it as well. That's important. And yeah, there are resources out there as well. We have some resources on learning JavaScript specifically for Google Tag Manager, the use cases that you would have there. I know that Simo has a course on it at Simmer as well. And I think just stay curious is also the thing where you would not just take a JavaScript that you found on a website and say like, oh, this is now my listener, but actually try it out yourself. Put it into ChatGPT, maybe it can explain it to you. That would be important. And then yeah, hack your way around. That's important part. I use JavaScript a lot for my own little projects. I use it a lot inside of AppScript, for example, for Google Sheets. I built a Chrome extension. So there's many ways to practice nowadays, and just let your curiosity go. But I hope these little resources help you out at the beginning, at least.
That's a really interesting idea, Julian, to actually use ChatGPT to add JavaScript comments explaining the code.
Yeah.
So Francesca has asked, the data layer is like cheese inside a hamburger. The flavors on top of it and bottom layers are mixed and sticked together thanks to it.
Okay. Yeah, I asked Francesca to explain the data layer. That's an analogy that I haven't heard before. I heard many different analogies, and I actually asked ChatGPT last time about the data layer as well, because I wanted to revise some slides, and it was quite, it actually used an analogy where it said, think of the data layer like WhatsApp. On the one side, you have your data tools, and the other side you have your website, and they need to communicate. So it's a chat room that you can connect different tools to and like exchange data. I was like, I haven't thought about this yet. So that's also a good exercise. Thanks for this one.
Yeah, and I suppose you could say a GTM is a data consumer because it's digesting the data layer
Sure.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone's asked, how long did it take for you to become an expert and start living from this professional? That's a good question.
Oh yeah, depending. So there's always the question of like, how long does it take? For me, it was pretty fast, but I forced it a little bit, right? What does it mean to be living of your profession? It this is very much dependent on your standards. For me, I was a 20 year summer old. I moved to Vietnam, the country that I'm now here, one of the cheapest countries in Southeast Asia to live in. And I kind of started working with GTM, got my first clients through it, and then started MeasureSchool. And obviously it was not, maybe not the money that you would make back in Europe, where I'm from, or from Germany, but it was something that that I built upon because it was a trend, right? Google Tag Manager was pretty small back then. I don't know. You tell me, Phil, but later it took off, right? And suddenly everybody needed Tag Manager deployments because the tool just seemed so hard to use at the beginning, right? And the version 1 of GTM looked very, or the version 2 was it, looked very, very different, and you really needed to understand a lot of things about it. So I would say that if you start nowadays, you can make it work pretty quickly, as there are platforms out there. There are platforms out there where you can find your first clients. You can make a name for yourself in these forums and help other people out pretty quickly. And there's this new tool out there, GA4, that you can latch on to and say, okay, there's Google Tag Manager, GA4, and I will help you out with all of these tools, depending on your skill set. So I think depending on your income level, you can make it work pretty fast.
Yeah. I was curious to know, Julian, if you had any noticeable like alumni's that have because MeasureSchool must have been, it's been going for, is it 10
years
years
now?
Yeah,
it's 8 years, 9 years now. And my passion is obviously teaching, but I think that this is also a path that you can nowadays take. Nowadays, it's relatively easier to build an audience and bring out videos and teach it to other people. So that may be a path that you want to go down as well.
Yeah, I think they always say you learn faster if you're not just listening, but actually having to explain something to someone. It sort of sinks in more. This probably has to be the last question.
Sure.
So Marcus asked, sometimes users can debug and check what events are tracked on a website. Have you got any recommendations to not allow this happening? Oh, so to turn off information.
Yeah. No, I think that if you can see the network request go through, that's like the gist of JavaScript. It runs on the browser, it's client side, so you can kind of see what is installed on the website, at least on the client side itself. Obviously, you could put it behind some kind of login system and not deploy this for a certain user, but as long as it's still running client side, you can't really do much about this. But Phil already said in his presentation, yeah, the server side, a server to server would be something that is completely out of the sight of anybody who visits the website itself.
Yeah, I think the only other thing I was thinking that I've seen with things like profit margins and stuff, which isn't necessarily, you don't want to expose in the browser, and
Yeah.
the like measurement, like server-side tokens or product IDs are used to kind of look it up, so they keep that information hidden. But yeah, it's not like the old Flash, which was compiled and you couldn't uncompile. Yeah, JavaScript is anyone can figure out what's going on in it. Okay, there's
Cool.
there's just one other question, Julian.
Sure.
So if someone's asked like, what's the cost of deploying GTM for e-commerce? But maybe if I just spin that question a bit, let's say they've signed up to a MeasureSchool course. How long do you think it would take for someone to get that money back, as in from doing an e-commerce? How many e-commerce setups do you think to cover that cost?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, really just one client. In the end, you need to have one client who pays you, depending on your rate, the implementation of an e-commerce website, because e-commerce is all about getting the data layer right, which oftentimes means that you need to create documents for the developers to implement, or you be able to utilize a plugin there. It's very valuable data for an e-commerce store if they don't have that set up yet. And you can definitely charge the $1,000 that we kind of charge our students for the membership nowadays. So something that it wouldn't take much time, depending on, obviously it can get larger clients, obviously take more time, but yeah, you can make your money back pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean for us, our minimum is like, it's in pounds, like 15K for implementation. Yeah. So like
Cool.
I've just put the link for
cool.
feedback. So if yeah.
Oh no, I will go over to the breakout room right now. So if you have any more questions, you can also ask me there. And please give me feedback. I would love that.
Yes, so I've put the feedback link in there, so people can ask further questions in there. Julian, I'll send you the list of questions after this. Probably it's going to be tomorrow by the time I get the chance to send all of those. Thank you again for doing the talk and sharing so much knowledge and yeah, well done getting so many YouTube subscribers, which is quite an achievement.
And I will go over to the other room. So see you guys there if you want to.
Brilliant. Thank you again, Julian.